So recently I Googled the world's most boring video on YouTube. And yes, I was having those bedtime moments where you're on your phone and you shouldn't be, and you're just scrolling through the deep dark web of the internet, right? And so it actually turned out to be this old 1989 Microsoft Word tutorial. And yes, it had that classic gray and blue type of vibe from the 80s with that classic 80s monotone voice.
One of the first things that you need to realize is that there is a major difference between word processing and desktop.
And deep down inside, I was so glad that I missed the 80s, but more importantly, I scroll down, I go to the comment section, and they were savage. So check out this one comment. I want this played at my funeral so people don't forget how interesting I was. As I was reading through these comments, it made me think, how often have we had to sit through boring presentations? What makes a video or talk really boring? And how can we get our point across in a more fun and interesting manner as well? So in today's video, I'm going to give you my 3-step process on how to never give a boring presentation again. This is the exact method that I use at my virtual summit presentations, YouTube videos, and even my high ticket sales conversations as well. And by the end of this video, you're going to have those 3 steps all laid out. What do I call this method? I call it the hack method. So don't miss out on it. We're going to be covering it right now. Whoosh. What's up? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Kevin. I'm actually a former pharmacist. I'm a YouTuber and entrepreneur as well. And on this channel, we explore the different people, the strategies and tools that just help us live a more kick-ass life. So if you're into that sort of stuff, make sure to consider subscribing to this channel as well. Anyways, like I mentioned, I recently found the most boring video on YouTube. And as I was thinking about how many boring presentations have I sat through before, I started thinking, crap, how many boring videos have I made? How many boring presentations have I given as well? And while I hate to admit it, the truth is sometimes I give really long-winded, boring ass presentations more than I would actually like to. Honestly, I bet you could attribute that to my many years of pharmacy school. We were forced to do so many boring presentations. Anyways, there's a cost of giving boring ass presentations in the real world. You might miss out on the opportunities that you truly want. Or if you're an entrepreneur like myself, maybe you let a deal slip out of your fingers because you weren't to the point or you didn't get your point across in an effective manner. And personally for me, one of my goals on every presentation is to give a killer presentation that comes off in a very entertaining way, right? Because no one wants to learn while they're freaking bored. So recently I've been reading this book. It's called How to Get Your Point Across in 30 Seconds or Less. It was recommended by one of my consultant friends. And I started picking it up because I was doing these presentations for sales and I wanted to get better at my YouTube videos as well. And by the way, if you want to get your copy of this book, I'll leave links below as well. But even as I was reading this classic book, I was thinking there has to be a much easier way. And that's when I came up with the hack method. It's my 3-step system to guarantee that I never want to give a boring presentation again. So what does hack stand for? It stands for hook your counterpart, finesse your audience with the right approach. Third thing is to close or call your counterpart to really take some action. You know, the point of these presentations isn't for mental masturbation. It's really to be able to do something to achieve a certain outcome, right? So let's dive into where this boring ass video from the 1980s went wrong and what we could do better through the hack method, all right? So let's dive into it. Step 1, the hook. So before you talk to anyone, do you know what they want? Have you taken the time to take a step back and put yourself in their situation? Do you know what they're looking for? And can you communicate that all within the first few seconds? So one of the things that I recognized really quickly with this boring ass Microsoft Word tutorial, they didn't do any of that. The first thing that sticks out to me is that it's really unspecific and super long. After the intro scene, it says Microsoft Word number 1. What the hell is that supposed to mean? And after seeing this long intro for 45 seconds, the guy pops in. And guess what he says? For the next few hours, we'll be discussing the basics of Microsoft Word. God, I just want to commit seppuku right now. And one of my first thoughts was actually the scene from Dave Chappelle. And it's with the guy sitting in the courtroom and he's like, wrap it up. If you guys remember the wrap it up box, comment below. So for myself, after giving a lot of presentations, what I realized, the truth is, a lot of people don't care about who you are or what you have to say. At least not yet. And what I found to be very, very helpful is to hook them. And this is where the hook comes into play. A hook lets your audience know the benefit of listening to you, why they should listen to you ASAP. And you might be asking, well, what makes a good hook, Kevin? Well, it's ultra specific, it's short, and most importantly, it's relatable to the people that you're talking to. For example, if Kevin Yee was to do a Microsoft Word tutorial for college students in the 80s who are writing their essays by hand, because that's how they used to do it back in the day, this is how I would hook them. Have you ever wrote your college essay by hand only to find you made a mistake on the final draft and you're like, crap, I have to start all over again? Well, you don't have to go through that. In today's presentation, I'm going to talk about how to use Microsoft Word so it can help you save time from rewriting those final drafts so you can get back to that college party. Sound good? Pay attention. With that example, it's relatable to the person I'm speaking to, it's super, super specific, and it's relatively short. I didn't take 45 seconds to explain the benefits. Your goal is just to wrap it up in just a few sentences. So every great presentation, there's always a really, really great hook. Step 2, the approach. So I can't believe I actually watched a lot of this video just to shoot this video, right? But one of the first things that the Microsoft Word guy says is, so before we begin, let's talk about the differences between word processing on Mac and Windows. Dude, that's really, really boring. No one wants to listen to that crap. When I listen to this guy, sometimes I get PTSD and it reminds me of my college days. And oftentimes when I was in college, I felt like I was being talked through, not talked to, if that makes sense. In fact, I hated being lectured to all the time. And so I remember back in high school, one of my classes I would fall asleep in all the time. It was called AP Psychology. And this guy had a really long beard and he spoke like this for 1 hour. And honestly, this guy would put me to sleep every single freaking time. It got so bad that I actually failed one semester and I hated social psychology after that. Sure, could I have been a better student? Absolutely. But I guarantee you, if he provided or did a better, more entertaining presentation, the outcome would have been very, very different. So maybe you've been in a very similar situation where you're with your parents, your teacher, or a professor, and they spent a lot of time lecturing you, and maybe you get the same vibes from this guy. So don't be like them. But what's the number one thing that all these people have in common? They all don't understand the approach. With the right approach, you can actually stir up a lot of great interests. You can make people curious. And most importantly, you can get people to listen to you. So fast forward to my college days, I actually had to do psychology for my pharmacy prerequisites, right? My professor, who we went to Hong Kong for the study abroad, she was teaching us social psychology, which was really, really fun. She knew what college students really cared about, especially young males like myself. The only thing that 20-year-old guys think about is, hey, picking up girls, chasing ass, right? So my professor at the time, she would use all these dating analogies and dating stories to get her point across of psychology. Did it help with picking up girls? Absolutely not, right? But after that, I really started loving social psychology. I actually loved it so much that I bought an old textbook, and sometimes I'll read it while I'm sitting on the toilet from time to time. And so when I also think of approach, I think about game plan. How are you going to get to your end destination or objective? And so this is where things get really fun, and this is where I come up with unique angles. When you're giving a presentation, I always like to incorporate these 3 things. Ethos, which is trust, pathos, which is emotions, logos, which is logic. These are, I believe, come from Greek, but these are the 3 things that you need to kind of persuade someone to do things. And part of persuasion is making things very interesting as well. You need all 3 points for a solid approach. Rather than listing each one of these out, what's the best way to do this? And for me, I actually love telling these concepts through stories. It's the most entertaining way to get your point across, and also it's a very unique way to just stand out from the crowd. Believe it or not, in my real presentations, I always like to incorporate a story to make it relatable to people, but also so I can embed each one of these concepts of ethos, logos, and pathos into my stories as well. Stories are that magical vehicle that kind of move things along. And you might be asking, like, dude, Kevin, stories are so corny. I've listened to so many boring stories. But again, core principle from the previous step that we're talking about is that it has to be relatable to them. If you're telling an interesting, relatable story to your audience, it accomplishes these three things, right? It's entertaining to your audience by going through that emotional roller coaster of your story. Second thing is like you're building trust by sharing real experiences and building that real connection. And the third thing is the tactical how of you solved a particular problem. One of the ways that I tell stories is through something I call the SOAR method. I actually learned it from my life coach from back in 2014, but I use it all the time. SOAR stands for four things: situation, obstacle, action, and result. And this, you can see, is a natural story arc, right? So when you break down the situation, some questions to ask yourself is, who's the character and what do they want? Who's the person that you're talking to? The second thing in terms of the obstacle is asking, hey, why can't the character get what they want? And what will happen if they don't get what they want? The third thing is the action, or pretty much the how. Who or what helps them get what they want, and how do they get what they want? And then finally, you break down the result. How are they transformed by the experience? By using the SOAR method, you're able to tell compelling stories that will hook your audience in and really engage them as well. I think the number one thing that we can all learn from the boring video that we saw earlier is, hey, don't start off, before we begin, let's talk about the differences between Mac and Windows. No one wants to hear that shit, unless you're trying to help your audience go to sleep without taking an Ambien. Which leads me to my next step. Step 3, the close. So if you took the time to actually watch this video, around 1 hour and 44 minutes and 44 seconds, this guy giving a Microsoft Word presentation says, the best way to use this video isn't to follow along, is to sit back and rewatch this video again. Maybe it's too late for some of you because it's coming to the end. I'm like, damn, if I watch this shit, I would be so pissed. Think about your viewer for a second. You just spent the last hour and 45 minutes only to be told to gather your friends, grab some popcorn, and watch this with me. That, like, the best analogy I can really think of is just like dating. Maybe it's like when you hook the person in with your photos on Tinder or something. Maybe you shoot some conversations and maybe you guys get to know each other a little bit through text. Maybe you shoot a few funny memes back and forth. Maybe you send some X-rated pics too, only for the conversation to lead nowhere. So whether it's a presentation, a YouTube video, or even dating, you have to lead them to the next step, the next action. That is so important. Because when you don't lead them to the next step or the next action, the truth is, information without action is just mental masturbation. I made that quote up, believe it or not, just now. The close is just a real simple thing. What do you want them to do after this presentation? If you're on a date together, you can ask, hey, do you want to go back to my place? For sales presentation, you might ask, hey, are you ready to jump in and get started? For YouTube, it might be smash the subscribe button, smash the like button so that this video gets boosted. Okay, I just had to, shameless plug over. Again, the close is simple. You're just leading them down to the next steps. So now that you know the hack method, you're probably wondering, Kevin, why is there a K in hack? And the truth is, I couldn't think of something that started with K, but more importantly, this is the quickest way to hack yourself to a kick-ass presentation. But do you want to know the most important thing to do if you're trying to give a kick-ass presentation? It's just to practice. But you're like, how do I do that? Well, first things first, I actually have this book, How to Get Your Point Across in 30 Seconds or Less. I highly recommend it. I'll leave an affiliate link below, but chances are you might be more into how do I persuade people? And I think this book, Never Split the Difference, is one of my favorite books. I'll leave a link in the cards with my review, but it's my favorite book for breaking down the tactics of FBI negotiation. Sure, maybe you don't want to be an FBI hostage negotiator, but he teaches something like sales through FBI hostage negotiation. And it really teaches you the nuance of communication as well. If you're more into sales and persuasion, I actually have a whole inbound and high ticket sales type of sales techniques as well. And finally, if you're more into personal development, head over, join my newsletter at refugeehustle.com/join. I'll send you a newsletter where every Sunday you'll get updates of what I'm doing, what I'm learning, life lessons with cool tools, strategies, and people, and the content that I enjoyed in the week as well. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
I'd like to spend, before we dig right into the program, I'd like to spend a few minutes and talk about some of the differences between word processing on the Macintosh computer word processing perhaps that